Put a few more chairs in.
I'll get that.
No, well, yeah.
You guys are in
Yeah, so good job.
awesome.
It's just, no, I saw it. Thank you.
I remember you talking about this is the topic
So is this what your part-time job now? Wow.
So that one is for community, so they know that we are using our funding. And then this is going to be on the historical society.
I think people are busier.
It's completely up to you. This is Humanities Iowa, and that's the Western Historical Society. Humanities Iowa, we just ask people to sign up for that, or sign in. They know that I have a spot. Well, they're an independent nonprofit as well. So what they do is they so they start working with people like Dawn.
I don't see a lot.
Full house.
Yeah, plus.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy St. Patty's Day. Take a look at the person next to you. If they're not wearing green, pinch them. Okay, all right, there's some good pinches. It's part of my evil plan. So thank you for coming to the Iowa Files. This is a monthly educational program that goes from September to May, sponsored by West Des Moines Historical Society members and donors, the Friends Foundation of the West Des Moines Library, the Iowa Arts Council, and Diana and Scott Hatfield, who are actually in the house. Raise your hand and wave. Hatfields, yay! Today's presentation is made possible thanks to support from Humanities Iowa, which is a private nonprofit and effort with the State Historical Society of Iowa. This is a cultural resource for all Iowans since 1971. Humanities Iowa brings humanities programs into the heart of Iowa communities. And if you have never looked at their list of available speakers, it is fantastic. So if you have a Rotary group or any other group, take a look at Humanities Iowa for a possible speaker. That's where we were lucky enough to get Mr. Shurr today. He's a certified prosthetist, orthotist, and physical therapist. Did I get it right?
Yep.
Okay. He's lived in Iowa since 1964. He is an author of many articles and books, and he has taught at the University of Iowa in physical therapy for 25 years. In addition, Don was trained in St. Charles, Missouri to pilot the reenactment boats used during the bicentennial commemoration of the Corps of Discovery expedition. This guy knows his stuff. So thank you so much for joining us today and talking about Lewis and Clark.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to, is this on? No. Okay, good. That's the first thing we got to do. There we go. Is it on now? No. Well, the green light's on.
It might take just a second.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'd like to thank you all for inviting me down. This was about a year in the works because of the COVID, and then I was in the hospital for 3 months, so we didn't have much activity going on. But I'm back and I'm doing the best I can. Okay. So what we're going to do is go through the Lewis and Clark expedition, and this is a 45-minute talk, and it's really an hour talk. So I'm going to have to move it along, and I'll try my best to do that. Okay? Yeah. Oh, she's counting. Okay. So let's begin with the engagés. Everybody knows the word engage, right? Because either they got married or had another way of knowing the word engage. The French who dressed like this, they were all mostly really wild people and enjoyed things like this. So anyway, they were the ones that pulled the boat up the river to Mandan, which is in North Dakota. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but just so you know that they came and went too. They liked it for a while, and then they were pulling all day, and they didn't like that much. So they left, and somebody took their place. So anyway, that's the word on the engagé. So let's talk about the two main characters. The first one was Meriwether Lewis. And he was a captain when he was appointed by Jefferson, because Jefferson was president when he took over the expedition. He was a boyhood friend of Jefferson's. They lived very close in Virginia, near Charlottesville, or Charlotte? Anyway, wherever it is, in Virginia. And he was schooled, which most people weren't back then, and particularly young people. So he knew pretty much what was known in the world at the time. And he was self-reliant and secure. He was very talented. And he was schooled in the sciences in particular, and that'll come back up as we go along. And he was an excellent horseman and a pretty good shot. Now, let's talk about Clark, and you'll see that they're very different. But for those of you that have ever gone from St. Louis to the coast on the West Coast know that you'd probably get tired of each other if you were out of the same mold. So we got one and the other. Clark was a woodsman. He was one of 10 kids. The youngest was 6, and he's the 6th in the family. He was good with enlisted men because he had actually worked with enlisted men, and Meriwether Lewis was one of the people that he was the captain of in about 1794 or so. And then it switched around, and they were both sort of together in equal, which is not military, but Jefferson gave his okay to it, so that's what they did. He was a good cartographer. Do you all know what a cartographer would tell me?
It's a photo person.
It's a what?
They take photos.
Yeah, they do. But they also draw maps because they didn't have any cameras back then. By the way, I'm so happy that somebody brought these girls over here, because I usually invite them and I almost always never get any. And I just love it, because they'll go back to school on Monday and say, "Did you know about Lewis and Clark?" I'll bet you do. So Clark was a better man on the river than Lewis, because Lewis had never been on the river. And he and his brothers, Clark and his brothers, went from Virginia down into the Tennessee, Kentucky area and were developing things down there so people could go down there and live. And so that's why he's the good riverman, because that's how they got down to Tennessee. His word was his bond. He commanded loose, I told you that, and they complemented each other. And you'll see as we go through this how that works. This is a letter from Clark to Lewis. And since you can't read it, I can't read it, but I can read it on this piece of paper. So I'm going to tell you what it says. Lewis invited Clark to come on the expedition and be his partner. And in the result of that says, I will cheerfully join you on an official character as mentioned in your letter and partake of the dangers, difficulties, and fatigues. And I anticipate the honors and rewards of the result of such an enterprise. And Lewis was very happy. You know, I can just see him wiping his brow because I don't think he really thought he could pull this off by himself. But that's just me. So why did they want to explore Louisiana Purchase? Well, it doubled the size of the United States to about 842,000 square miles. So that's a big chunk of land, and it went all the way up into California. And, you know, there's always people like the Spaniards that wanted to come up and take over. So they were out and about and trying to take that land and mark it so people would know whose it is. Jefferson wanted for Lewis and Clark to find a water route to the Pacific because he knew that there was something out there in the West and that it would be good for our country to take that land and then work with people to try to, work there, take things from them and give them other things that they don't have. It gains scientific knowledge of the uncharted West. That was the other thing that Jefferson was really very outspoken about. He wants to know what's out there. And so Lewis kind of took this over because Lewis was a scientist. He had been trained as a scientist. So when they went west, every time he saw something he didn't see before or didn't know what it was, he tried to get one and then measure it and put it in a little sack or something and take it back home. He did that with plants and animals. Obtained detailed information about the Indian tribes. They knew from the people that worked the water up to North Dakota that there were Indian tribes, and they knew that some of them were friendlier than others. And so it was their job to try to get together with those folks and see if they could trade with them and get the information about the Great White Father in Washington to be their boss as they quit, going around from place to place in the West and start trading with the Americans or the others. Explore and record existing natural resources. We sort of talked about that. That was Lewis's job. And then chart and map the purchase for future followers, and that was Clark's job. So when they went, they knew they were going to have to get food along the way, and there weren't any McDonald's out there. So they had to see if they could find some way to get food. And in that period of time, it was usually fairly middle to large animals, deer, elk, antelope, buffalo. And they used flintlocks with usually about a 50 or a 55 size bullet, which was enough to take down many of those animals. The people, the engagés that were pulling the boat up the river were eating about 9 pounds of meat a day. So how would you like to have 9 pounds of meat tonight, tomorrow night, next night, next night, next night? They get sick of it. Anyway, when Lewis went to Pittsburgh to get the keel boat, which I'll show you in a minute, he also wanted to pick up some rifles from Harper's Ferry because that was where they were made. Well, he got there and they weren't done. There's a song here. So he had to take. They had some 1792s. We got any gun nuts in here besides me? Nobody? Okay. Well, these were 1792s, and they were good guns, but they weren't as good as the 1803 Harper's Ferry guns. So Lewis got what he could get, and I just wanted to give you some idea there. He ordered 15 with a 34.5-inch barrel, 54 caliber flintlock, and it could kill an animal at 100 yards. So that's not bad. I mean, I don't know, again, how many of you go out and try to hit a target at 100 yards, but unless you're good at it, it's a long distance. So the skills of Lewis were, I forgot to tell you that when his dad died at age 11, when Lewis was 11, his mother wanted him to come back and take over the farm, like they did back then, right? Oldest boy does it. Well, he didn't want any part of it, but he did have these other skills he knew what a distillery was. He was a carpenter, he was a blacksmith, he was a shoemaker, he was a weaver, he was a cooper. What's a cooper? Makes barrels, yeah, thank you. A hunter, a mule skinner, a gunsmith, veterinarian, and a physician. Now you got to kind of take a physician with a grain of salt here, because there were no medical schools, okay, except there was one in Philadelphia, and the doctor there was Benjamin Rush. I don't know if any of you know that name, but he's on the Declaration of Independence if you want to see his name in print. But he had traveled to Europe and taken medical courses there, and then came back to the United States and worked in Philadelphia and was an excellent physician. So he wanted to get Lewis, since he was science, that he wanted to know if he could train Lewis to be as good of a physician as he could. And it didn't work so well, because Rush was kind of, what's good word? He was sort of put off by Lewis. And you'll get this trend as we're going through this. Lewis was a strange bird, okay, to just put it very bluntly. And if you're like the best doctor in the United States and in Europe, you don't want to be talking to somebody like Lewis. He'd been better off to talk to Clark. But anyway, all right, so why did Lewis, why was he destined to lead? We'll go through these just quick. He hated planning, I told you that. He loved Rome by himself, okay? He was multi-talented, I told you that. He was self-reliant, I told you that. And he studied and learned from Jefferson. The year and a half before the expedition, Jefferson hired Lewis as his assistant, like administrative assistant. And so for a year and a half, he got together every day with Jefferson and found out exactly what he wanted and how he wanted it. So when they got to the point of getting out there, that it would work for him. Now this is a little different here. This is a letter to Lewis's mother. Okay. Now Lewis, well, I'll just read it to you and then you'll get the hint here. It says, "The day after tomorrow, I shall set out for the western boundary. I calculate on the pleasure of visiting. I had calculated on the pleasure of visiting you before the departure, but circumstances have rendered this impossible." Duh, right? He's not going to go see mom. He promised mom he was going to see her before he left. He's got no idea. He's not going. Okay. All right. So let's see. Where are we? 15. He says that it'll be. He thinks he'll be gone about 15 to 18 months. The nature of this expedition is visiting you before my departures, but altogether, though, tribes of Indians who are perfectly friendly. How about that? He doesn't even know what's out there, and he's telling his mom that these are perfectly friendly. So anyway, you get a little flavor for Lewis. The items that led Lewis to assuming command. Lewis became Jefferson's secretary. We talked about that. He never married. None of the people on the expedition would be hired if they were married, because they didn't want people that were going to be worrying about their wife and their wife worrying about them. So they didn't marry. Mackenzie was a Canadian who wrote a book about the distance between eastern Canada and the western part of the world, as they thought it was. And he said that they had found the route to the west. Lie. he didn't find anything. He was honest and went for the open and easy route to the Pacific, which we'll talk. So now, how did they get there? They were in St. Charles, Louisiana. Okay, that's just west of St. Louis. And if you ever get down there, there's a wonderful place to go and see some things that are related to the expedition. So I highly recommend that. So one of the boats that they took was a pirogue. Well, what's a pirogue? Well, a pirogue is a wooden boat with room for 6 to 10 oarsmen. Lewis and Clark used 2 plus 6 dugout canoes to reach Mandan. The dugout canoes were they would just dig them out as they needed them, and if they broke or were lost, they just get cottonwood tree, cut it down, do it again. So Lewis and Clark used 2 and 6 dugouts. By the way, Mandan is north of Bismarck, about 32 miles, and it's a wonderful place to visit if you ever get out there. This is a white canoe, or I'm sorry, a white pirogue, and you can see that it's a larger one. There's also a smaller, that's the white one in the top one, and in the bottom one, that's the red one. And the red one's a little bit bigger than the white one. So they had these, because they had to go in different places. And when you see the keelboat, you'll see why they had these. So what is a keelboat? Well, it's a wooden boat built in Pittsburgh, 55 feet long, 32-foot mast, 31-foot hold, and a 10 to 14 oarsman. Now this was one that was the drawings for it came from Clark, because he'd been on the river a lot, knew the good and the bad and how this would help them the most. So there is a picture there. This is Ottawa, by the way. Anybody know where Ottawa is? Yeah. Well, there's a park up there. It's right ahead of the casino. If you find the casino, you'll find this Ottawa Park. And they have a big keelboat like this that they had out during the 2004 expedition. And we got to all learn how to drive it, which was really kind of nice. It's a huge thing. But we took people around this is the backwater of the Missouri too, by the way. Here's another view of it from the front. And you can see it's pretty good size. You can also see there's a tiller in the back that's trying to keep it straight so it doesn't, cause any trouble. And these little wooden pieces that you see were Clark's idea, because if they did get into it with the Indians who were shooting arrows at them, they just flip those up, stick their rifle in between 2 of them. So who were the Corps of Discovery? The Corps of Discovery was a military operation. And they had all these people, and I'll just run through them a little bit here for you so you understand what we got. So there were the 2 captains, Lewis and Clark. There were 4 sergeants. Are there any military in here? 1, 2, yeah, 2. Okay. So they had, it was in a military way that they kept this thing alive. So sergeants 4, corporals 1, privates 30 or 32, it's really hard to find a number that anybody can hang their hat on. There's so many different numbers out there when you read the different books. So I just picked, 41 or whatever, 41 or 42. Interpreter, they need interpreters. They got a bunch of different Indian tribes that they can't talk to. So, and French, Drew Yard was French, and he did really well at French, and you'll see that in a minute. And then they had extras, Charbonneau, who was Sacagawea's husband. Sacagawea, it's Sacagawea, okay, not Sacagawea, because in the Hidatsa Indian in their language, they don't have a J sound, so it's Sacagawea, okay. And then she had a baby, John Baptiste, when they were in winter up in Mandan, and his name was Jean Baptiste, and we'll talk about him in a while here. And then the other ones were York, which was Clark's slave. So Clark, their plantations had slaves in Virginia at that time, and Clark had York as his own slave. But when he brought him on the expedition, he wasn't a slave. He had a gun, he got the vote, he ran around and danced for the people and the Indians who had never seen a black person before. And it's just kind of interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Seaman or Scannon was a black Newfoundland dog that Lewis bought in Pittsburgh when he was up there, because the boat wasn't ready and he had to have something to do, so he bought himself a nice Newfoundland dog. And the Newfoundland dog made it all the way to the coast and back, so he's a pretty good dog. And then the engagés, which we talked about. Now, if you notice my lead on this thing, I say that this is in Iowa, Lewis and Clark in Iowa. And after I did this for about a year, I got hammered because I didn't talk about Sacagawea. So we're going to talk about Sacagawea, and I'm going to run pretty quick through this, but it's worth it because she helped a lot. There's what I was just telling you about, there's no J sound. And Clark couldn't figure it out, so he called her Janie. And he and she were friends, and I'm going to leave it at that point, okay? So who was Sacagawea? She was a Lemhi Shoshone, born 1788 near Tenwa, Idaho. And this tribe was nomadic. So that means that they pick up and go and pick up and go and pick up and go. So every day or 2 days, they're in a different place. So it's not like they're going to plant any corn or mushrooms, because they're going to be gone when they come, to fruition. So, and that's important only because she did not know how to plant or farm until her capture by the Hidatsa when she was age 12. She got kidnapped, and now she's working for not the nomads, but the people that are, raising corn and squash and the rest of it. So we got somebody who knows how to find food that's in the ground and know how to find food that's being grown, so they won't run out of it. She has more statutes of her than any woman in history, and that includes Hillary Rodham Clinton. She bore 2 children with Toussaint Charbonneau, a French-Canadian interpreter, 1 boy, 1 girl, and she died December 20th, 1812 at Fort Manuel, which is on the border of North Dakota and South Dakota, at age of 25. Now, if you go out in the library and pick up 6 or 7 books on this subject, you're going to find out that this lady really died when she was 99 years old in Wyoming. And I have no idea where that all came from, but this is what I've studied before, and it makes the most sense. And I've been to her, what do you call it, a monument just on the border of North and South Dakota. So I'm going that way. And if you want to believe that she died at 99, that's your prerogative. Now, what I'm going to try to do here is show you how, if we were going to talk to these three right here, okay? And Charbonneau is going to speak to Sacagawea in Hidatsa, okay? Because that was her native language. And then Sacagawea speaks to the Shoshone and translate it into Hidatsa, okay? And then Charbonneau translates Shoshone into French, and that's where these come in. And Labici, who's French, translates French into English for Lewis and Clark, so they know what the Indian chiefs just said. So think about that a little bit. It was a long conversation, is about all I can tell you. So what were her contributions? I've already hinted some of them, but I'll hint some more. She could find food anywhere. She symbolized peace to the natives. She talked their language. She wore their clothes. She looked like an Indian, okay? And that was very helpful, and we'll talk about that going down the line here. She was the information source at Three Forks to the Lemhi Valley. In western Montana, there are three rivers that come together, which they call the Three Forks, and they go three ways. And they voted, Clark had a vote on which way to go because they did not know which way to go. And then all of a sudden she stands up and says, it's that one, because that's where she grew up. There's a beaverhead rock there, and she knows where the river was. So they called off the others and took her to down that river, and they got where they had to go. Her greatest contribution was the acquisition of horses from the Shoshone to cross Montana and Idaho. I have a paper over here that you may want to look at before, after this is done, just to see, because what happened was they were told by the Canadians that it wasn't very far across Montana. Now, anybody that's driven in Montana knows that it never ends. So they had to come up with a better idea. So Lewis took 2 or 3 people and went out scouting around trying to find any kind of an Indian that might be able to trade them a horse or two for whatever they need out of the, food or tobacco or whiskey or whatever. And the first day, nothing. But they saw somebody way out there by himself, and they started toward him, and he disappeared. The next day, this is still Lewis, they were a little bit farther out, and all of a sudden 3 Indians came up to him. And one of them was the chief. And you can start passing the coin around if you would. Thank you. So this coin that you're going to see in a minute was what Jefferson wanted the big chiefs to have, because that's the biggest one there was, and the big chief was supposed to get that one. And there's a funny story about when they did do that, when they were in Council Bluffs, that the littlest chief came over to Clark and gave him back this one that's about as big as those nickels there, and said, I want one like him, So the plan didn't quite work out as well, but he didn't give it to him. He just tried to tell him what was going on. So anyway, the Indians took them back to their where they were, housed out. And when they got back there, Sacagawea looked at this chief, and she went running up to him, and it turned out to be her brother, because he was the chief at the time that they were there, and so getting some horses was pretty easy, because he gave them horses, and of course they traded them stuff. But she also found a girl who she grew up with before she got taken up by the other people, and she was happy to see her, as was the girl happy to see Sacagawea. Her greatest contribution was the horses, okay? And then Clark in the journal that's blue, it's the third one over. There's 13 of those. And then there's another one that has a combination of like today, tomorrow, next day, which is a nice piece of work where you could find something like this. And what she said, or what Clark said, was that she deserved more than we had to give. Because remember, this is a military operation, no women in the military, so no matter what they do, good or bad, they're not going to get anything out of it. And Clark says she deserved more, and she ends up getting more, and we'll talk about that. So I talked about Sacagawea. She died of putrid fever. Putrid fever back then was what a woman got after they had a baby, because if they got infected to the least, they would die from it because they hadn't turned to antibiotics until much, much later. So Clark here's where I was going. Clark educated her children in St. Louis. When they got back, he said, you bring your kids, 2 of them, down to St. Louis, and I'll take care of them, put them in school so they can do then what they want to do. And they went down, and it's pretty interesting when you start reading that part. And both of them returned, both of the children, after they were educated, returned to the West. I can't find any place where Lizette was her name. I can't find her anywhere. And I've asked a lot of friends that know a lot more than I do, and they don't know what happened to her. Jean Baptiste, on the other side, he ended up hauling people from St. Louis to wherever they wanted to go in great big wagons, made a lot of money, and lived till about 65. So let's talk about the 2 chiefs here. Lewis on the right, Clark on the left, my son-in-law's dad on the bottom right, and I'm not quite sure who that other guy was. This is from St. Louis. I'm sorry, St. Charles, and they have these 2 guys in brass. Oh, I forgot the dog there. He's there too. Take a look at the right, which is Lewis, and look how sort of really nice looking he is. He's got on everything, hat, whatever that thing is. Compare that to Clark. Clark's got his hand on his knee. I mean, that says, I think, as much as I could say for sure, that there was a difference in the 2 guys, but they really did well together. And the artists that do these pick that kind of stuff up and work it forward. There's another one here that I'll show you in a minute. How are we doing for time? 15 stars and stripes, because that's how many states there were at the time that they left. This is in Clatsop, which is in Oregon. And these are, you can see the person standing up in the back's Lewis. Clark's down in front with the gun. They're scanning over there. And that's York in the middle. But you see the deal. Here's Jefferson, and then Clark's down on one knee with his gun. They're just so different, but they really went together. What do you guys think this cost? Remember that the government, the people in the House and Senate didn't want to spend a nickel on it. They thought it was crazy. And they did the best they could to keep it from happening, but it happened. Anybody got a guess? $39,000. Jefferson's wife, I'm sorry, no. His, anyway, the ladies in Washington made bakery goods and things to sell in Washington at the time to give them money, so they'd have money that they could go on the expedition and didn't have to, get any more money from the Congress. Whoops. There we go. So this money was spent for boats, which is a lot of it, and $696 for Indian presents and trinkets. Indian presents and trinkets. Number one present that they wanted, blue beads. They came from China. They were working China a long time. Anyway, that's what they wanted, so that's what they gave them. And then the balance of it was salaries, which they received at the end. And then food and bear grease. What in the world they want bear grease for?
What did they use the bear grease for?
Mosquitoes. And if you read the books, they spell mosquito 22 different ways. So why was the trip perilous? One, they needed to get upstream and the river was coming against them. So they used poles, oars, or ropes, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. The threat of the Spanish armor, you remember I told you the Spaniards thought part of that western coast was theirs. And they tried to find Lewis and Clark. They couldn't find him. The river, which was flooded that time of the year. Hey, we have floods every year, right in the middle of June and July. And then the unknown location of the Teton Sioux. Whoops. Dang. Why is that doing that? Oh, man. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to hurry and I'm not doing very good. I don't know.
Why don't I work on this and
Okay. Okay. I gotta find where I'm at.
you have to be a rock star and take the microphone with you, though.
Oh. Okay. I was going to show you the painting. There's a guy called Charles Fritz. Anybody ever hear of Charles Fritz? I'll give you a hint. He's from Mason City, Iowa. He's an artist, and he went along on the expedition and did about 100 paintings of different places and different happenings of the expedition. And there are some of those in the okay. Oh, thanks. They're in that. There we go. This is one of them, and this shows the white cliffs that are all up and down. And then you can see in the front they're pulling the rope. You can see that they're oaring. You can see that they're poling, and you can see the guy in the back running that part so it doesn't get the boat cockeyed going up the lane. There's many of these, and if you go up there, figure on spending about 2 or 3 hours. So let's start. We'll go from St. Charles over to Kansas City, and then up to Iowa. And they're finally in Iowa, down by Hamburg. Anybody know Hamburg? It's right as you no, it's right as you come in. And then this is about 150 miles, roughly, give or take. This is Ottawa. These are cottonwoods. This is the backwater of the Missouri. And another reminder about that those boats were made out of cottonwood trees where they haul out with axes. 150 miles, Lewis and Clark entered July 18th of 1804. They stayed in Iowa for 34 days. The men were shot. They'd had it. Rain, mosquitoes, food. They wanted to just sit down and take their stuff out of the boats and let them dry out and enjoy a little something good to eat. So that's exactly what they did. And when they stayed, when they were going up, they stayed. If it was easier on the Nebraska side, they stayed there. And if it was easier on the Iowa side, they stayed there. Now, I always say that if it's something good, it's on the Iowa side, okay? July 22nd, they camped for 5 days and they fished. And they caught white catfish is what they called them. And they ate them. And they were tired of eating antelope and deer and whatever. July 27th, 1804, near Omaha is where they met the old chiefs that were too old to go out and hunt buffalo in the West. And they had their meeting up on the bluff, thus Council Bluffs. Okay? So a little bit more about Iowa. Lewis called it a most beautiful prairie grass. Now this is out west, okay, in Iowa. I don't think it's a great, beautiful prairie grass because it's all been tilled up and it's growing corn, but that's what it looked like to him back then. They they had different kinds of timber. I told you about the cottonwood. They also had willow and elm and others. They killed, remember they're supposed to take, if they find something, they're supposed to take it back to Jefferson. So they killed a braro, which is what they called it. You and I call it a badger. And I was surprised that they had never seen a badger because there's badgers, pretty much around. But Sergeant Floyd is very unwell. Sergeant Floyd is the only person that died on the expedition. He died up in Sioux City of an appendix. So, York took care of him after Lewis bled him to death. I mean, back then they bled you until you basically died, and that's what happened to him. But the other thing, both of them had their birthdays in Iowa. They were four years apart and about 4 days apart. And they both wanted cherries, apples, grapes, currants, and unknown flowers. And then they also wanted a specific kind of meat. Anybody got a guess? A beaver tail. Now, why in the heck would they want a beaver tail? Anybody? It's got fat in it. If you've ever skinned out an elk or a deer or an antelope, there's no fat. They're terrible eating. And anyway, so what did they find? They found, these are things that they hadn't seen it before. An egret, everybody knows what an egret is, right? A bull snake, I knew what those were when I was a little kid. Then there was this tern, which is a bird that lays its eggs on a sandbar and then just leaves them there and takes off. And like a little turtle, all of a sudden in the temperature goes just right, they hop out and away they go. Lewis wanted to find out how big that pelican pouch is, so he measured it and he said it was 5 gallons. I think he missed at least one. And then he called the drum white perch and the shrimp really were crawdads. So here's Floyd, one of 9 young men of Kentucky that were bought and got into the group, and all they do, their responsibilities was to kill animals so they'd have something to eat. And they used like 22 grade bullets because they wanted to get like squirrels and rabbits and that kind of stuff, because the other kind can come from the bigger animals. He kept an excellent journal. Many of them kept journals. Lewis and Clark had to keep journals. That was one of the rules from Jefferson. And only one man died, and that was Floyd from a ruptured appendix. They buried him 4 times because the water kept taking him down. And York principally cared for Floyd during his death. I told you that. This is in interpreter up in Sioux City, and this was just put in last year to give some idea what he might have looked like, and that he got to carry a gun, because that was unheard of. The monument on the right-hand side of 29 as you go into Sioux City is that monument that's monument to Floyd. Stop in and take a look. It's a very good thing. So what were the firsts? Okay, now girls, this is the thing that you want to, put your little dots down, because these are the ones you're going to have to tell the kids about tomorrow at school. Okay. Okay. So what were the first? The first was the death of the expedition member, the first Indian council, and that was with the Otos, which is a tribe of Indians. The first election west of Mississippi, and York got the vote. Naming a taxidermy of many animals and fish and plants which never had been seen or named before, and they saw their first coyote on August 12th, which now would have been in St. Louis, or would have been in South Dakota, but it was in Iowa because it's August 12th of 04. York was allowed to carry a gun, and the party left the territory August 21st, 1804. They arrived in Mandan on the way home, 45 degrees below zero. They sent the keel back. They sent the keelboat back to St. Louis with all the things that they had that they took up on the way to send to Jefferson. They returned to St. Louis September 26th of 1806, which is a long time to be gone. It's 28 months for anybody that's counting. Clark continued as an Indian Affairs officer, and Lewis became an alcoholic and died. Lewis's family was depressed people, and he fell right into it because he really thought that Clark was going to buy a house and they were going to live together for the rest of their life. And Clark had not married nor had children, and he wanted to make up for lost time. So he made up for lost time, and Lewis died. This is on a pillar east about 30 miles of Billings, Montana on the interstate. And this is one of the very few things that is still around that you can say they were here that time. And it's Clark, and it's July 25th, 1806. So if you're in the area, it's a quickie, but it's way, something you probably ought to see. I think that gets it. We're about 5 minutes over. I'm happy to answer questions or try to. If any of you have anything that I said that you didn't understand or question that you just want talked about. Anybody? Yes. I'm sorry? Oh, that was supposed to be coming around. Is that what you mean? Did you see? Okay. That one?
One more.
Before this one? Oh, the first. Yeah, okay. Question? No? Anybody else? Yeah.
Was Sacagawea allowed to vote?
The question is, was Sacagawea allowed to vote?
I've never been asked that question.
She said to go down the river.
Yeah. I'll have to ask one of my buddies that knows more about it than I do. I would guess no, because she was female, rather than no because York was male, but that's just a guess. Yes, sir.
Is it pulling both of the ropes? It's pretty large, because the Missouri River is pretty rapid flowing river, it's pretty deep in those places. Our river, our river is walking in the water.
Yeah.
They're pulling off from the shore.
Yes. When it really got bad, they spread the ropes side to side and got up on the shore and pulled it. Because then not only could they get it, but it would stay straight. The boat would stay straight, so it wasn't going to be doing this.
That's why the rope, Missouri's a really wide river.
Oh, yeah. Clark was just absolutely unbelieved by the Platte River because how much water goes, how fast, and yet it's only about 4 inches deep. Yeah, he thought that was unbelievable. Anybody else? Okay, I appreciate it. I'm sorry for some of the stumbles that I take, but yes, sir.
How long was the expedition?
28 months. Uh-huh. Yep. That's an easy one. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you, Don, very much. He does have materials up here for you to take a look at if you're interested. I have surveys. I would greatly appreciate you rating today's program. And if you have any ideas of any other programs, please write them down. We may do them next year. Next month is the story of Selenia Bians. She was a survivor on Schindler's List. Went to high school here in Des Moines, graduated from college here in Iowa, and the Iowa Jewish Historical Society has written a fascinating book with her cooperation. So their executive director will be here to talk about the Holocaust and what it was like to be part of Schindler's List. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you again to Humanities Iowa for sponsoring this, the Friends of the West Des Moines Library, the West Des Moines Library, and the Hatfields for making programs like this possible. So if you would like to come check out more about the West Des Moines Historical Society, the Jordan House is at 2001 Fuller Road. We are a totally independent 501c3, and we've got exciting stuff going on. If you've seen anything in the newspapers about the new park that's going to be going in next to us, so please consider signing up for our e-newsletter, and we'll let you know what's going on. And please do consider becoming a member of the Historical Society. We're not part of the city. We're going it alone, and we're doing a great job. So thank you for being part of it.